You ready? I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the panel members. I'm Marcel Larondo. I'll be the chair. Tracy Anderson to the far left, and Linda McFadden to my left. The assessor today will be Tricia Caldwell, and the secretary today is Kelsey Harrison. We will be hearing applications for revision of assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Act. Matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matter must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessment of property are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to an application of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Thank you. Tricia, I guess we'll start at the top. So the first file.
As far as I need to, Dufferin, I left my file in the office. I'll have it in about 10 minutes. Can
Okay,
you go to the next one?
We'll leave Dufferin for a minute then. Move to the next one, put Dufferin on the bottom. That's item number
Would you
4.
like to swear on the Bible or affirm it all of them? Could you please state your name, Tricia Caldwell? And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. And would you like to swear on the Bible or affirm it?
Affirm.
Could you please state your name?
Rocky Newfeld?
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I do have to set my timer because I only watched 2 hours. I didn't know it was Rocky today. I'll have to watch for it. Tricia, when you're ready.
All right, let's start, we starting with 1595 Brookside Boulevard,
Correct.
okay? And that's roll number 14096652100. The roll year is 2020, and we have an assessed value of $1,546,000. If you could turn to page 7 of my brief, you'll see a map of the subject location. And on page 8, there's some aerial photographs. And page 9, there's a street view photo. This is a storage warehouse building, 1 story, built in 1991, with a wall height of 18 feet. It's zoned M1, light manufacturing. The land area is 110,319 square feet. The plan area is 14,122 square feet, giving a land to plan area of 7.81. If you could please turn to page 2, you'll see that there was a sale in 2012 for $1,200,000. And then I'll get you to go to page 5, please. We have our cap rate chart. In the center, it says the City of Winnipeg industrial cap rates range from a low of 5.50% to a high of 9.8%, with 60% of the cap rates falling between 6.34% and 7.80%. And if you flip back to page 4, I have my income workup. The building is divided into 4 premises with a total leasable area of 14,122 square feet. And the overall rent is $7.09. We applied a vacancy loss of 3.5%. Expenses at 2%, a shortfall rate of $3.75, giving a net operating income of $92,771. We have a cap rate of 6%, giving us our assessed value of $1,546,000. Now, if you can go back to page 3, this is where I have my rent comparables. All my comparables are storage warehouse properties in the same neighborhood with similar wall heights, and rents range from $6.50 to $10.68. And that is my evidence. I ask the board to confirm our value today. Thank you.
Rocky, any questions?
Yes. You have 14,122 square feet rentable, and in the mailer, which would be your page 13, you'll know that the owner has said 12,250. Did you reconcile that?
No.
And did you have a chance to look at the file from last year when the same issue came up?
No, I didn't.
You weren't aware that the board changed it to 12,250?
No, it would be.
And I believe that the assessor consented to that at hearing? Well, he did, I was there.
Okay, it hasn't been changed in our system.
In your
so,
system,
yeah.
okay. So if I told you it was just an old rent for a trailer that was on the books and it's never been removed, but the trailer's gone, you wouldn't have any reason to doubt that?
No.
Okay. And you'll actually note on page 15, the difference in square footage. Point number 1, 1,872 square feet, monthly rent $1. But it's still on the books, but it's not being, it was a trailer in the back that's long gone.
Okay.
Now, you did have some actual rents in there, and just, sorry, I guess we're pretty close to the actual rents on the space there. It's just the difference in our area on that. One question on one of your comparables, 231 Oak Point, you said that that's industrial warehouse?
We have it classified as storage warehouse.
And what part of the property was that? And that's the picture on page page 9.
Which one are you talking about?
231 Oak Point.
Okay.
Now, on page 9, 231 is on top of the building. Is that the one you're using?
I'm sorry, I don't.
231 Oak Point was
Right.
was your rental comparable.
Right. Okay.
So just confirm that on page 9, the number 231 is on top of your comparable?
Yes.
You're aware that that was a motorcycle dealership that is now being rented as a car dealership?
No, I wasn't.
For that sort of strange sign up front, Lone Star Harley?
Okay. And is it a
And then all those
warehouse?
cars that are parked around there for sale? You're not aware that it's a car dealership now?
Is it, it's a storage warehouse that is,
No, it's a car dealership with service in the back. I mean, we don't have a major difference in our rental except for the area, but I was just wondering, I was just pointing that one out, that was an error.
okay.
Now, as to the capitalization rates, looking at your chart on page 5, is the same industrial rate applied to every style of tenancy in this list, single, multi, industrial, et cetera? A, B, it's all the same?
Yes.
Now, what sort of properties are comprised in your industrial analysis? Do you know, have you seen the comparables that they put in the parameters?
In industrial, we have finished flex warehouse, we have standard flex warehouse, distribution warehouse, loft warehouse, heavy manufacturing warehouse.
Okay, I'm reading that too, and that's on the back of the parameters, the last page.
Yeah.
Now, but do you differentiate the application of a capitalization rate based on where they, how they're coded?
No.
So if you had a flex warehouse that's built out to a high degree of office finish, say it was on Caniston or somewhere like that, and if you compare it to another property that could be a foundry, a fish processing plant, or a sewer cleaning company, they'd all get the same cap rate?
Not necessarily. Cap rate is not based on the property type.
Well, that's what I'm asking you, because you've capped this at 6%, which is pretty much the lowest end of your range, isn't it? It's even lower than the 20th percentile.
Yeah, it's capped at 6% because of its age and its size.
Okay. So if you had something that was the same age and same size and was flex warehouse that was rented out to a financial planner in office finish, it gets the same rate as this place, which is a facility for people who clean sewers, correct?
I can't say for sure.
Well, do you think that there's not, should be some consideration for a heavy usage property and that the building assets will deteriorate at a quicker rate than a light usage property? Doesn't an investor want to recoup his money quicker if his building's being beaten up?
Sure.
Did you have a chance to inspect?
Yes.
Pardon me?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay. Were you out there when we were out there together, or was it another time with you? Oh, okay. Would you characterize this as a good level of finish?
I'd say it's average.
Okay, those are my questions, thanks.
Any questions, Linda?
No, I was gonna ask about the cap rate, but I think she's answered that.
Tracy,
No questions, thank you.
could you tell me which one of these 4 would be that trailer that you've got listed here? You've got one at
I
3,500.
believe it's the third one.
1,872 square
Yeah,
feet?
yeah.
Okay,
Is that correct, Mr. Newton?
Yeah, that's,
on with your presentation.
Thank you.
Mr. Feld.
yeah, I think I kind of gave you the outline of the question. This is a dirty manufacturing building. It's got a contractor as one tenant, and then the sewer cleaner, who is the owner of the property, is the other tenant. And these are the guys who go around with the trucks and blast out the sewers when they get plugged and clean them up, and they come there and park. Yeah, it's not a pretty business, but this is industrial. So we obviously find it rather unusual that a 6% cap rate would apply to something like this with a heavy building usage. And the building is not in average condition, it is not even in fair condition, it's best characterized as poor, the last inspection I was on. I don't think there's much in the way of office finish at all, because it's a working space. It's got, the only good thing about the building, it's got power. And it's got adequate power for Tricor to do the manufacturing in. But the Unijet, the owner, actually had to sacrifice his share of the power so that Tricor could run their equipment. But they don't need power because they're just parking their sewer cleaning trucks in it. At least the last time I was there, they were. So we've used the actual paid rent for Tricor and then downgraded the owner's rent slightly because of the power he's not using, and it's a slightly larger space. And 82,000 is our NOI, and that probably compares pretty favorably with the assessors after it would be corrected for this space. It was an old trailer that was parked in the back, and they were getting land rent for parking the trailer in the back. It's long gone. So I believe the assessor's number would be like 86,000, so it's fairly close. And the point, we're fine with the shortfall and vacancy, but the point is when the assessment department lumps all of these properties into one category, and on my page, I don't know what this is rated here, 19B is a good, the last page. Picture at the bottom. Now, that's the development on the former Labatt's Brewery site, and the CAM on that is about, if you're not separately metered, the CAM is in the neighborhood of $7 to $8 a foot, because it's flex warehouse. Now, I know the taxes are $4.50 a foot, and utilities run around $1.50 to $2, and then there's other costs. So the point is, you can't lump these into the same category as industrial, because first the costs are different, and then of course the users are different. That's an office finish, and industrial has been my complaint for years. Are treating them all as one. There's no differentiation here. It's a 6% rate. That's the only rate they're going to apply, and they're applying it to everybody. This is a rough usage building, and it's going to, and you can see from the picture, we did have interior pictures. Probably in another year we'd had them. I guess we should have put them in the file. But you could just see from looking at the outside, it's just rough usage. So anyone who's looking at investing in this would want to get his return on investment quicker, because you're going to have to look at some sort of remediation or a wasting asset in the building. So I think our rent, now we've applied a cap of 8.6, and that's because the best sale we've seen in a decade is the Slate Portfolio Industrial REIT, which was a working REIT. There was 13 properties. I think 2 had predominant office, and 2 were predominant retail, and the rest were miscellaneous industrial, actual industrial. So that's a fair one to use. It'll be a common theme today, by the way. There's pretty industrial and there's ugly industrial. They don't deserve the same cap rate. That's our presentation.
Questions? Tricia?
Yeah, you say this is dirty manufacturing. Isn't dirty manufacturing usually in zoned M3, not M1? Isn't M1 light manufacturing?
Well, dirty doesn't mean that they have to wait for zoning permission to do something that's harsh usage on it. When I mean dirty, I mean it's a harsh usage. So you can have, for example, a warehouse that stores a heavy, awkward product where the forklifts are banging all over the place and shipping it out that's acceptable in M1 or M2, and it's going to be a harsh usage on the building. You're going to have an asset that goes down, and a non-harsh usage would be like a flex warehouse where predominant use is office, and there might be a little warehouse area in the back for display items, you know, a sales office with items stored in the back. Call it the difference between a working space, like an industrial working space, and more of an office working space.
Okay, you have a lot of rent comparables. How many of your rent comparables compare to the subject property?
We're relying on paid rent, and the rent comparables are just to illustrate that the paid rent is likely above market.
The paid rent in the income and expense?
If you'll notice in our chart, most of these rents are well below what they're getting in the subject property. So, again, I don't think we're contending that the rents are, if your rents are terribly off, we're contending that they're paid rents.
Okay, but you are contending that your rent is lower than our table rent, and
Slightly, yes.
so if you look in the income and expense mailer, it's attached in my brief. And on page 15, it has the tenant verification form where you'll see the tenant that pays $3,094 per month.
Right.
And he pays an annual property tax of $117,219 and general administration for $1,226. So his rent, 12 months a year, plus the property tax and the admin fees, is a total of $55,573. But if you go back to the income and expense page on page 13, he's reporting a rent income of $91,584. That's just for rent, and if you go down after he's recovered the property tax and admin recoveries,
Well,
it's $120,812, and he has a net operating income of $120,812. He hasn't included any expenses here, but his total income on this page is, it doesn't reconcile with the tenant page. So where is he getting that income?
well, if you'll look at the mailer, he has checked off owner occupied.
Yeah.
So he's got a book rent in there, which is meaningless. He has a tenant, I think I said this earlier, Tricore Projects is a tenant. Their net rent is $3,094 a month, which is $37,128 per year, divided by 5,250 square feet, that's 707 per square foot, and that's what we applied.
Okay.
And because the rest of the space is owner occupied, and based on our inspection, we believe it to be inferior due to the less amount of power that's gone there, because the tenant's using the power, we just downgraded the rent. And it's also economy of scale. The Tricore is a better space. And we just picked that rent on a bit of a subjective basis, but I think that's a fair calculation.
Would you agree, though, that he is from somewhere getting rents that he's not reporting?
Hang on one second. Oh. No, they don't.
It's just there.
Okay, sorry. What was your question?
Would you agree that he's getting rent or income from somewhere that he's not reporting in the tenant verification?
No. I was just reminded that Tricore gets the yard usage as well. The only part that the tenant uses is the other half of the building. The owner uses the other half of the building where he parks his trucks inside. He's not getting rent from somewhere else, it's a book rent.
So where is he getting this extra income?
It's book rent. If he decides to establish a book rent and he pays one company that he owns to another company he owns, it's not income. It's a business transaction. He has one paying tenant at a market rent. You can see that was signed in 2016 for a 2-year term. And they did declare owner occupied there. On page 13, they declared partially owner occupied. Now, I'll tell you the other problem with this. You're trying to look for a problem that doesn't exist. If you'll notice that on that page 13, you said he's declaring $120,000, and you'll notice what that's comprised of. $91,000 in rent income, $28,000 in property tax recoveries. So what he's failed to do in the second column is to provide the expense of the property tax recoveries, because that's supposed to go in there. And they're not free. He's not making money there. So he's failed to put on line number 216 his property taxes. He's failed to put any expenses there whatsoever. And you can see that the income that they're declaring is admin recoveries of $1,200 a month from the tenant. That's $14,000 a year from the tenant. So you can see what they do is they split the rent, or sorry, they split the taxes and they split the admin costs.
Right.
They're all listed on page 15, but they failed to put them in the middle column as an expense on page 13. We did that
don't
that
deny
work.
that.
Pardon me?
I don't deny that.
No, but we did the analysis, and so we know that that's what the numbers would come out
Okay, did you fill out their income and expense report?
to. No, we didn't fill this one out.
Do you typically?
For this property, no. They're a family company, and they fill them out themselves. Their business is cleaning sewers.
Okay. Your cap rate sales. I know you rely on your slate portfolio sale a lot. So that was how many industrial properties in this package deal?
I believe it was 13.
Okay, so, but it was sold with industrial, office, retail.
Well, the company classified them all as industrial, and within the assessment department guidelines, they would be all industrial. Some were flex office, some were flex, were a retail warehouse, some were storage, some were manufacturing. There was two shipping facilities.
So how do you take that many parcels that have that many different uses, different vacancy rates, different shortfall rates, and apply one cap rate to this whole thing?
Well, we had all their financials, and they were quite accurate financials, because the vendor was Huntington at one point, and then who then became Slate, and they've got phenomenal financials. They're required to, because they're a REIT, and they trade, and they got to report to securities commissions. So they're not like, informal ones they do for CRA. These are for investors. So we provided all of those, and we had the sale, which was the share sale. And we also worked for Huntington, Slate, who took them over, and Vermont, who bought it. We worked for all of them. So this is firsthand. And it surprisingly didn't take a lot of time to work it out, because the data was well prepared.
So in this, when it says CM office, commercial office, that was also in with the industrial properties.
Let me just see what you're referring to.
1700 Ellis.
Oh, yeah, oh,
The
I guess
585
that's,
Airport.
yeah, but, you know, the thing about that particular portfolio, 1700 Ellis was a converted warehouse. And I think MTS was one of the first tenants after it was converted. So it started its life as a warehouse, and then below it, 585 Century. That was one of the first sort of flex office warehouse buildings in Winnipeg, and to this date, it's still classified as office, but when it started, it was the same as all the flex ones. So you can tell by its location, and if you've ever been in there. But that was definitely, and then the other one, 1340 Sargent, which is, you've got classed as a retail warehouse, and that of course it's a jobber's site, and then now it's open to the public.
So an office property, does the same parameters apply when you are doing an income workup?
What we did on this site is, if you look to the side, is we did it two ways. One, we did it with the actual income and the actual sale, and we got 8.92, which we adjusted to 8.6 because we removed 2019 Sargent from it, because that was it's a very strange property. It's on a leasehold with an expiring land lease, and we think the 8.6 was what the market would have reflected. Then we did it a third way with the city parameters, and we actually did exactly what you're saying, is we took the city parameters for vacancy and shortfall and applied them to all the sites based on how they were coded. And it wasn't a difficult exercise. It's all done in spreadsheet. We came up with 9.95%.
Okay, and this sale took place in October 2015. Do you have any sales from the reference period?
This is a rather early hearing for us, and we're still working on our cap rate study. My activity in the market in the 2 years in between, I'm quite comfortable that there's been no change of any consideration in the market. Because we've reached a place with cap rates where it's technically impossible for them to go lower than they are, because they're based on the cost of money. So until banks start paying people to borrow money from them, you can't see a decrease in cap rates, because you have to account for the cost of money. A cap rate is an investment rate return, and it's always based on equity versus mortgage. So you always have to cover the mortgage off. And as I said, unless you're getting preferential financing, you're at the bottom. You can't go lower.
So you're saying there's no change between 2016 and 2018?
Well, Winnipeg is a rather insulated, strange market. Our other markets across Canada have shown significant increases in capitalization rates. And if you looked at our Collier's cap rate study, you'll see that they're now reporting rates that are higher than Winnipeg. And part of that issue is that it's a reporting glitch and a lag in sales, and the manner in which they're created. We're an international company, and we get to monitor investment sales across the world, and they're not capping at 6%. Everyone that gets offered our way internationally is an 8 to 9% these days, and Winnipeg is still trying to pretend that a 6% exists. It doesn't, because there's no money to be made. The only time you're going to see a 6% is a very, very stable multifamily building, or potentially in a land rent where there's an upside for development, and there's no wasting asset.
Okay, well, you've included all of your information here is from your 2016 cap rate.
Yeah, I mentioned, we haven't updated this yet, and the numbers, our little brochure won't have changed the numbers. We were just looking at it the other day, and, we get quarterly reports done, and the little dashboard says this one's up, and the next one it says it's down, and then it's up, and then it's down. you're not gonna see a difference in the reported rates. But bear in mind that Colliers doesn't even handle properties like this. What's happening in the real world is that, the concern on real estate is that the change in technology and the change in way items are transacted is making retail a very, very scary proposition. And it's also impacting companies that do transportation and warehousing, the way it's happening, and the stability in the multifamily markets is because people have to live somewhere. And that's why I'm saying that that's the nature of cap rates. You're not seeing investors willing to go on a limb, and everything, when you talk about heavy manufacturing or manufacturing of any type, is always gonna be subject to being pushed offshore to Asia for manufacturing. And the markets are reflecting that. They're not really interested in investing in North American industrial as much, and which is why the city is so far off base. Now, if it's services that service the general public, as I mentioned, a flex warehouse where you have a financial planner and retail services that service the public, that's a little bit more stable than manufacturing. The height of idiocy was the tariffs that were put on steel and aluminum by the United States with the thought that it would recharge their industry and get industrial back going. Well, who in their right mind is gonna invest billions when the tariffs will be reversed in a few weeks because of the political persuasion? The markets are reflecting that. It's not a good investment.
No further questions?
Tracy,
No questions.
Linda,
I have no further questions.
can you give me a little further description on this property on your page 2? The one with the dot on it, that is the owner's building, correct? That's the one he's using?
On my page 2, the one with the dot is the subject property.
So the one with the dot is the owner's building that he's using?
No, well, that's the entire building. It's 2 units inside.
There's 2 units inside that building?
Correct.
So part of that building is being rented by Tricor?
Part by Tricor, part by used by Unijet.
So the entire square footage of that building is what?
12,120,
12,250
12,250 is the building.
is the building. But now the other tenant, Tricor, gets no land value, no extra land with his
Tricor gets all the land,
Tricor,
gets all of the land.
and the owner.
The owner just uses the building for parking trucks in a secure place.
And at the back corner here, across, he's got his trucks there, but.
Yeah, it looks like he's got, but this is a dated picture too. I don't even know if this is the same one we clipped from 2 years ago. Was it?
Picture?
Yeah.
Aerials.
Where's last year's picture?
As of right now. This is all the owners using.
Okay. I can confirm that with the assessor, but she and Eric were out, and they mentioned, he's saying that, and the front part is being used as of
Just for access.
the last inspection. You should swear in if you're gonna say that. Do you want to swear in?
Sure, swear in.
Yeah, and he can explain.
I don't need to
Could you please state your name?
know. Here to do phone.
And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Just that,
Go ahead.
just stating that basically the fence line that you can see here is access. This is all the owners using. All this backspace now is all Tricor.
So this section here,
It's
That's-
access for the fence and the owners.
he's beyond the fence, right?
Yeah, and then the Tricor's entrance is beyond the fence.
So if,
And those trucks,
You-
he could be right, it could be an old picture, but.
It is.
I don't think.
I found the appeal from 2013. It's
Yeah.
the same picture.
I don't think he lives in his trucks.
Should have upgraded it. Updated it.
so you're, the owner's rent you got at $6.50 Rocky.
You're right, correct.
Why are you lowering that from the Tricor rent?
No control of the land, or more land for Tricor for one, and the main thing is the power usage, which is, they've got, I believe, 400 amp service, but all the paneling is powering Tricor's equipment, and the owner isn't pulling from there. So if he had a use in there that required power, he'd probably have to upgrade the panel. And it's just capacity.
But he doesn't at this time.
No, he doesn't at this time. And he also has he's got a more space on economy of scale, but less land. And that was the reason for the downgrading.
But he does have some land. And originally you said he had none.
That's because I hadn't been out as recently, and that's why I wanted him to swear in and correct this.
So would that have been taken into account that there was some land when you
Yeah.
put that rent together?
Yeah, well, 'cause he
Not
did,
really.
he did the valuation. He
Not
did
really
the-
accessible land, like it's basically just a couple parking spots and then to get into the other spot. I would still contend that the difference is in the land, that's why the biggest.
How about, and I like your subjective with him filling out his sheet,
Well, just.
$91,000
No,
subjective.
Let's just read the assessor's workup, and I'll show you how well we did our workup.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit, I'm having a stupid day today, so I'm a little slow, but I have figured this out. You'll note what I said is on the assessor's page 13, that they declared $120,812 in income, but
Yeah.
zero expenses, but they collected for expenses. So they just failed to subtract the expenses on that side of the balance sheet. So when I just did that, I come up with 83,922 as declared income, net income, 83922. And we're using 82618. So we've allowed for a little more expense, obviously, $1,000, and we won't hang our hat on that, but we do deal with it. Oh, I'm sorry, and there's one more issue to be brought up, and I don't know if this board has heard many commercial appeals this year. The city used to have a management rate of 5%, and they've deleted it. What this management fee accounted for were the non-recoverables, things like asset management, cost to run the place, which can't be recovered from the tenant, and they're all gone now. So you should see this report shortly. The major property management firms in the city are undertaking to do a non-recoverable report for you. We finished our draft at Colliers, and we dealt with approximately 95 properties, 30 of which couldn't be utilized because they had versions of gross rent in them. The ones that had declared net rent, we did our calculation of non-recoverables, and our range of non-recoverables was from 9% to 23%. And the 23% was just a bad year, because that happens in expenses. But we're looking at a minimum of 9% for a typical managed property. And I'm not talking about properties like this either. I'm talking about professionally managed and owned properties where the revenue can be in the millions. The non-recoverables are still huge, and the city has decided not to do them. So we're still putting them in at 5% as a matter of principle, not just principle, but there are non-recoverables in every building. You can't recover from your tenants. And I've had conversations with the other property managers who are doing studies as well, and I find that their findings are about the same as ours.
If I may, have you dealt with this issue yet? Either of you?
No.
Tricia, could you explain to the members what has happened with that 5% and where it's gone to?
Yes, we did remove the 5% management fee because the market didn't support it. Everything, we get income and expense questionnaires from every commercial property owner, and the majority of them are owner occupied and they don't have management expense, and the ones who don't, most of them recover their management expense. So this is an unusual situation, it's not common for, there's not a lot of gross rents. They're usually net rents where the management expense is recovered. So the market just didn't support.
We went through this historically 15 years ago and 20 years ago, and there were a couple of different attempts. One was that it should be different for multi versus single, and then there was a similar sounding argument where the assessment department said, well, look at these properties, you're recovering your management fees, so you shouldn't get them back. That's not what's covered in the management expense. What's covered in the management expense are items that cannot be recovered. I take exception with what the assessor is saying about that they are not declaring them, because the properties we reviewed, we took the income and expense statements that were submitted by professionally managed operations and used them. And we relied more heavily on ones that were part of, recovered by Securities Commission, where they had to declare everything. Now in this case, I'll give you an example why they're wrong in this case. This property doesn't look after itself for free. There are two full-time people. Ursula is one and her assistant is the other. Ursula is Morris's wife. Her salary has to be accounted for because she looks after their properties. She doesn't do it for free just because she wants to give the city a break. She gets paid. You know that my fee for appeals is not in there, not a recoverable. It goes in their general income. I'm pretty expensive. No, I'm kidding, but the point is, those things, their accounting fees aren't in there. They're not recovering them. They are recovering taxes and some on-site work. And that's what the management fee is for. Now, on properties like retail, what it's for is you turn over a suite, CRU, and you gotta do some fix-up. Well, you can't charge the other tenants for that. You gotta put it in your books. Now, what most companies will do is if it's a lot of money, they'll take long-term amortization off and depreciate it over time. And we looked at those and we didn't really want to rely on them, but what we did rely on is where they had to do some repairs that had to be done and that weren't something that could be capitalized. That happens a lot on turnover. Or items that aren't covered by the lease. For example, in many buildings, they won't repair the HVAC, so you have to cover it. The auditing fees, the professional fees are not recoverable. Leasing commissions are not recoverable, but yet they're an expense. So anybody who's buying a property, just because the city doesn't want to acknowledge them, you know, if you're buying a property and you want to tomorrow go and buy a strip mall and you know that you're going to have to pay an agent a commission, that's not free. It comes out of the bottom line, and that's why the 5% is there in the workup of the assessments, is to acknowledge these. And as I said, it varies. Some buildings have atrocious years when they have a lot of unrecoverable repairs. Think of government tenants. I don't know if anyone's ever read a government lease, provincial government, but they exclude a lot of things. You know that they don't pay for elevators? No, provincial government doesn't pay for elevators. That's a non-recoverable expense. Now, in the bottom line, when they're showing it, the property owner is showing it to their shareholders, and they declare it as a non-recoverable, then the shareholders know, well, you know what, that $10 net rent you're telling us isn't really 10. No, it isn't. It's more like 9. And you can write it up that way, or you can write it up the way we used to have with the assessment, which is just put a blanket 5%. That's a standard parameter. And it's not the 2%. The 2% is replacement reserve. And that's for fixing long-term items. You have a failure in your wall system, you got a leaky roof. That's the big money, leaky roof. I can go on for a long time, so you're gonna have to just tell me to shut up at some time.
Oh, I never do that to you, Rocky. The subjective part, I guess you're not really that far off at 91,000, because I mean, it says that even with the city's new number, it would be 86, so
Well,
it's pretty close to what they said for their rent, is it
As I
not?
mentioned, our calculation was
86,205.
If you
If you use the
subtract,
city's numbers,
if you use the city's number and subtracted the wrong space, yes,
yeah,
that's
that'd be
correct.
86,205, which is pretty close to the
Yeah,
91.
and I don't think it's worth a dispute over.
Yeah.
Too much time spent on it. I think our issues were the management expense and the cap rates and fixing the leasable area, which, and I can show you a copy of last year's if you want to. The decision is based on the applicant's leasable area. No one from this board sat on it, so.
Go ahead, show it to us.
Do you want to see it?
Yeah.
Does the assessor want to see it first, or you want to?
Pass it to him, make sure it's okay. That can help clarify some stuff. Now, you're looking at an 8.6 on your cap rate.
Right.
I don't see anything on your, anything in your rates that show that high a cap rate.
Well, this would never be in the Collier's study of properties. You'll note in our study, hopefully I put in the blurb, in our evidence, our definitions in here.
I can see it.
Yeah, page 4B, benchmark definitions. Industrial, multi-tenant, steel frame, precast concrete, tilt up 25,000 to 100,000, 10 to 20% office space, modern building, average lease duration 6 to 10 years, investment grade, covenant strength. Tricor and Unijet aren't investment grade. 15% growth on a 5-year term for the lease. This doesn't fit our categories, and so we don't track these.
Okay, but CBR does,
Well,
and so does Cushman, correct?
that's interesting because this morning, I saw this same table, and they were having CBRE tracking. CBRE lost their Winnipeg affiliate in 2015 when Marcel Chartier and Capital Group went independent. So they don't have a presence. They have one agent based in Calgary who comes to Winnipeg and does big deals only. So we don't know where the source of their data is. We know they're not transacting. We know that Chartier's group, my neighbor Rennie and Trevor are the ones doing it. And I'm in their neighbors in constant contact with them. We know what they're doing for deals because they call me to do their appraisals. And, you know, last one I did for them was a window manufacturer. I think we had it 8.5%. Current deal, because he's a manufacturer. There's no, and that's what the market's bearing. Cushman, I haven't looked at their reports either. We do know that their appraisal presence has dropped dramatically and they're focusing on development deals. And I know that Martin is more working on development than they are on selling. And I've got to watch what I say here. No, it's not private. I've appraised several of his projects, his industrial projects, and they tend to be in like he has the industrial projects they're reporting on are ones like on Fort White Way where it's an office for a contractor, a daycare, and a recreational facility inside what's called office warehouse flex. So that's not warehouse, that's not industrial. I think the people who are doing this style of industrial in our city aren't the ones who are making reports like Capital Commercial. Chartier's old group is doing a lot. Just trying to remember who else was well, it used to be Graham Rouswell did a bunch. I haven't seen him for years, but I think he's still active in it. This would be their category. And Colliers, we do a fair amount as well, but I know for a fact they don't go into our reports.
So the city's numbers for the 20% and the 80% of 6.34 to 7.8. Are you saying that the city at 7.8 is,
You know, I'm gonna ask the board a question. Has anyone ever seen one of their comparables? Has anyone even seen the input parameters on their comparables? We hear, and I'm not picking on Tricia here, but we hear stories about how, well, if the age is this, it changes this, if it's got this, it changes. We don't know how many parameters they use, when they change it on it. Provinces like Saskatchewan are far more transparent with it. You know, they deal with building area multipliers, and they're right out there in public with them. Ceiling height, which is a massive issue on industrial rates. Not age, utility and ceiling.
I don't want to debate you on.
So my question to the board, and answer to your question is, I haven't seen them, you haven't seen them, I know you haven't, and you haven't seen comps. How can you question a myth?
Well, we do have some stats here,
May
but we
I?
know, we'll jump in a minute. But we see the 5.5 is the low, the 9.8 is high, so that's a stat.
But I'd like to see what they're using, because it's the same shell game they play with multifamily conversions, where they take a project that's basically vacant, and someone buys it on a per door basis, sinks some money into it, and says, oh, look, we got a cap rate there. We got those ones too. They
Okay,
don't.
but what are you giving me to bring it up to 8.5? I'm not hearing anything that brings it up to 8.5, and I don't see any record that you're building to get it there.
Age.
You said the study doesn't cover this building.
No, not the Collier's marketing study, the blue one. In the back on pages 12B, 13B are rates.
12B,
Yeah.
and those rates are for,
No, those are industrials, and this, to be fair, was.
12B?
Yeah, 12B, 13B.
yeah?
2 pages of comp, including the slate portfolio. And
Okay.
this was last year's work, and we're in the midst of updating our numbers with the sales we have, and you're not gonna see a change in it, you're just gonna see the same things, the ups and the downs. I'm just trying to think of significant transactions. We saw a lot more user buildings sell this time around on a per square foot basis, or lease ups later. I think we're gonna have one in Hutchings that's gonna come in high. I haven't done it yet. And, wait a sec, I wrote myself a note here. I have an 8% on Rothwell Road for new construction.
New construction.
Yes,
Rothwell?
yes. It's not in there yet, but it'll make the study.
So this one, we know it sold for 1.2 million or 1.5. What brought the value down?
Well, I'm gonna pause a second, I gotta think about, no, I'm, with my clients, I tend to know them and do a little bit more work for them than tax work. This company, Unijet, and Morris has got an expanding business, and he's having a hard time finding places to park his trucks. This was a desperation. It came on the market. He saw a place to get his trucks in, and he bought it up. Same time, he bought land across the street from his main site on Brookside in the city of Winnipeg, and tried to get the zoning changed to allow him to build a truck storage facility. Didn't get it. Now he's gonna try to find land maybe in Rosser to build a truck storage facility. He was heavily motivated for a place to park his trucks. He inherited Tricor as a tenant, and prior to buying it, he was the tenant in the building himself on the other half. So we weren't relying a lot on the sale simply because of his personal motivation. In industry of any sort, if you ask someone running a business, what are your three most important costs, and the top cost is going to be labor, the second is gonna be logistics, and a distant third is real estate.
And this is being used as a repair shop as well, right?
No, just storage. He's got a repair shop on Brookside in Rosser. And his pump out, he's got a bit better zoning for it, because they're actually washing the insides of the trucks out there. So all that effluent is going into Rossers.
Tony Wagons. You had another question, Trish?
Well, I just find it interesting that he keeps bringing up how our, he never sees sales. You give us your cap rate sales, but we don't have any of the financials. We don't have an NOI so that we can verify that that's done the same way or done right. And the other sales, I've gone through a few of these sales where you have similar cap rates on them that you do on this wonderful slate portfolio sale. They have similar cap rates, while these ones are built in the 1940s and in really poor condition. So what kind of condition are these in? These are just numbers. You're not showing us much either. And I don't.
You have three questions there. Number one, I inspected all these properties. The slate ones were not in poor condition, not at all. There was some that could be characterized as poor. 51 Aikens is a rough building in terms of utility. It's good for its age, but it had rough utility. And 367 Poplar, which we're never going to rely on because there's many other problems with it. When we put in a cap sale like this, we go and inspect them. We don't just, and to say that it was poor is not a fair comment, because they're not. Now, you're saying, how come we're not showing you this? And I remember, if you recall, the act specifies that the burden of proof is on the city. We provided far more evidence to the city. Now you're trying to say that, oh, well, you've got to show us more than that to disprove us. No, I don't. The burden of proof is on the city. You got to show something. You have no evidence whatsoever. You don't like what I'm presenting you, I'm not giving you the full details, show me yours, and we'll trade off. And none of these end up going to municipal board anymore, so we can actually review what the city has done, at least not in the current times. And I'm actually looking forward to see workups on cap rates, because we did bring one into the municipal board just a week ago on parking lot sales. What a joke. The city works them out at 3.7%, and then their support for it was a news release saying it was 6%. And I said, well, where'd you get 378? Well, that was from the mailer. But you're relying on the, where's your title on the sale? Oh, it didn't transact in title, it was a share sale. So what'd you rely on? The news release. Well, why didn't you rely on the 6% from the news release? Oh, because we worked it out differently. It was a doubling. From city declared at 3%, owner declared at 6%. And that's what we're gonna find when we bring them there. I'm not, this has been a very annoying system. But again, let's go back to the burden of proof. The city has failed to meet the burden of proof on cap rates. They have a study. Every time we've seen the details has proved unreliable. And I look forward to sharing that municipal board order when it comes out. That I'm sure is going to back up what I said.
No further questions? Anything in closing?
There's a 2012 sale for much more than what he is asking for here. I don't believe that the value has gone down significantly below that 2012 sale. So I just ask you to consider everything, and that's about it.
Rocky, you want anything?
Yeah, am I getting my order back?
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, if you take a look at that order, it was the same issues presented to the board. The assessor's actually asking for $1,552,000 that year, and the board changed it to $987,000 after looking at the information. The city has an error in the size, and they changed the rent, they changed the cap rate. That's the history of this site from the tax reasons. We told you what was wrong with the sale, and I think that's, if you have any sort of a grounding and valuation, you know it doesn't meet the definition of an arm's length transaction or a market transaction. It's out. There was far too much motivation, and this is rough usage, not a pretty office.
Can I ask you a question now? I know you both stopped, but what's your position on dropping it to the 12,000? Dropping that one piece of the trailer?
If we took,
You never
Sorry.
spoke to that position on the,
yeah,
Dropping it,
obviously that has to be changed,
yeah.
yeah.
And it's,
How it would
how do
change
we
the
make it,
value.
how do we make it change so that we don't get it caught?
Going forward?
Yeah,
When I get back to the office, I will remove
Okay.
that from,
so you will be removing that?
Yes.
Okay, that was my question. Leave that one with us?
Oh, I don't have a copy of that order.
Oh, we're gonna have to get a copy
Yeah,
then.
I'll need to-
Okay, go get a copy. You know, we'll hold it for a minute because we're gonna take a break in a few minutes.
Okay.
Matter of fact, why don't we take the break now and we'll pay the extra money, shut it off. Everybody's here. Let's get back at it. 2315 Dougal. Tricia, when you're ready.
All right, 2315 Dougal Road, roll number 09010262,700. Storage warehouse in southeast Winnipeg, and 2020 value is $1,303,000. On page 7 of my brief, you'll find a map. It's just east of Plessis. And on page 8, you'll see some overhead views, and page 9 is a street view. There's one building on the property built in 2001 with wall height of 19 feet. It's zoned M3 heavy manufacturing. The land area is 217,926 square feet. Plan area of 9,648 square feet, giving a land to plan area of 22.59. On page 5 is my cap rate chart. You see that 60% of our cap rates fall within 6.34% and 7.80%. On page 4, we have an income workup. It's broken into 2 premises. It has a leasable area of 12,048 square feet. And it's an overall rent rate of $6.89. We have a vacancy loss of 2.5%, expenses at 2%, a shortfall of $3.75, giving an NOI of $78,209, a cap rate of 6%, which brings us to our assessed value of $1,303,000. On page 3 of rent comparables. All rent comparables are storage warehouse like the subject. They're newer vintage with similar wall height. And they also, I was looking for ones with good land to plan area. And the rents range from $6.90 to $7.50 to support our rent. Thank you, Mr. Chair, that's my presentation.
Questions?
Yes. Did you get a chance to inspect this property?
I've been at this property.
Okay. And your rent comparables, I'm just looking at the ones at the higher end of the range are on Wall Street. Do you consider that to be the same neighborhood as Dufferin?
As Dufferin?
Yes.
No.
So the ones in that general area then would be the first 3 comparables ranging from 535 to 643.
I think you're looking at the wrong one.
Okay, the wrong one.
Okay, well,
Which one are you looking at?
which property are we doing?
2315 Dougal?
I thought we went,
No, we didn't. You thought we went back to the one we put at the end?
Yeah.
I'm going, something's wrong there.
don't worry about it. I won't miss a beat here. The rent comparables on this one,
Have it.
I've got the right one here, 2315 Dougal. Where on Dougal is this? Can you tell the board?
Show us on the map.
East of Plessis, correct?
Correct.
at the end of the service land inside the city of Winnipeg?
Just,
And your comparables, would they be in similar locations?
Not necessarily.
They're all in developed industrial areas, correct?
Yeah.
And what are these comparables? What's their usage?
One is underground sewage water treatment. One is a mechanical contractor. One is food services distribution, and one is asphalt construction and repair.
Okay, so construction and service industries. Now, which is the underground sewage contractor?
Nicholas.
Okay. And what's being done in the subject property?
They store vehicles.
They store vehicles on your picture page.
8.
8. Sorry, no, page 9, top of page 9. You say store vehicle, I'm reading there, it's a sales and service center. There's an auto dealer, are they not? Truck dealer.
Well, they actually have their main truck dealer on Regent Avenue, and this is where they keep the rest of their trucks.
Well, they do store some trucks here, but they sell the Isuzu brand out of this location, do they not?
Okay,
Because they can't sell it out of the Chevrolet site.
okay.
And it says right there, Isuzu, commercial truck sales and service, correct?
Right.
Now, did you consider looking at this as an auto dealership?
No.
Just 1 second. Oops, I started it right now. Now, had it been classified as a truck dealership, would your parameters have been different?
I don't know, I don't deal with car dealerships.
Well, for example, capitalization rates, they wouldn't take a capitalization rate from industrial, would they? From this chart? For a truck? And you did mention, quote this earlier, and you are.
This is a storage warehouse.
You're calling it.
They may have a-
Right, you're calling it a storage warehouse. But I'm asking you, had it been labeled as a truck sales and service center, would not the parameters have been different?
I can't say.
Okay. No, but you said you've been in the place where, did you see anyone trying to, an opportunity to buy a truck there?
I went in when they first opened,
Oh, so you haven't been in since then?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Before they moved the Isuzu in then?
No, when they put that.
When they put the Isuzu in? Okay. Is it open to the public?
I can't answer that.
You said you were in there. Could you walk in as in the public and
Well, I walked in, so I guess so, yeah.
buy a truck if you, buy an Isuzu if you wanted to?
I wouldn't buy an Isuzu, so I don't know.
I only know one person who ever did, and it was my brother, but anyway. Yeah, neither would I. But someone could hypothetically walk in and buy an Isuzu, correct?
Yeah.
Retail. Those are my questions, thanks.
Linda, any questions?
Not for the assessment.
Tracy?
I do not have questions for the assessment.
I guess I'm along the same lines. If this is a dealership, where would it fall? It'd fall under retail, wouldn't it?
It's not just a dealership, they're, as you can see, they're big,
Yep. The storage.
overhead doors and whatnot, they do work on vehicles. They also have fleet of vehicles that they, for businesses that they work on.
Isn't rent higher on a dealership?
I don't know, I don't do dealerships, retail, so.
I guess I'll find out when Rocky comes at it. Rocky, give us your information.
As with.
We'll see if you're pricing it like a dealership.
Okay. I'm gonna add on some extra service costs and extended warranty, you want all that on here? As with most all of my clients, this is a very long-term, more involved relationship. I've done the work for the Victor Group for 15 years now, and yes, I was part of the acquisition of this site and the evaluation process. And we've also done numerous valuations on the property for various reasons. This site was part of a requirement to expand very, very quickly. They had to segregate the Zuzu from their other dealership because they weren't allowed to have multiple brands on the same site. And at the same time, they were expanding brands, and roughly the same time, they acquired the Nissan brand. And while this was happening, the manufacturers stopped storing cars for them. If you're as old as me, you'll remember that there used to be this large compound near the Canada Packers site where there were several hundred cars parked, and those were paid for by the manufacturers, and then the local dealers had the opportunity to go into that inventory. So with the collapse of GM and then sale and resale of Chrysler and then Ford's problems, manufacturers stopped allowing anything to be purchased on or to be brought in on a pay later. You had to buy it up front now, and you had to take possession of it. And as a result, what we saw was a tremendous pressure on the dealers to get more room. Every single auto dealer in this city has a compound elsewhere. Now, the Victor Automotive Group had been using the compound on the Packers site, and then they had some overflow space available at Mitsubishi on Waverly, which they stopped being able to use because it had to be dedicated to Mitsubishi. They had the big site on Regent, 7 acres, but that wasn't big enough for the Chevrolet brand and the body shop. So for a while, they had some rented space on Plessy, and subsequent to this, they bought 3 more sites to deal with the requirements, the business requirements. And I was involved in every one of them, and firsthand I can tell you that market value was not the consideration on the purchase price. Came onto a site that could be zoned and used for it. They went through a lot of properties and Dugald, and the reason they wanted Dugald is because there's a street behind the dealership on Regent, and I'm trying to remember the name of that street, that goes through, and when Plessy was being repaired, they were able to get through. So that's 1501, 1501, Dugald, 1505 Dugald, and then they put the trucks at 2315. And this used to be a contractor's site, so he had heavy equipment and a fenced compound, gravel fenced compound. So they liked the compound, and then moved the Isuzu brand there, sales and service, and then overflow parking for Chevrolet trucks. So what the assessor said is partially true, but it is also a sales and service site, and it's also part of their larger operation. Subsequent to that, they purchased another 15 acres almost adjacent to this site because they have more and more demand, business demand for storing vehicles. And they also now have the Ford dealership in their stable. And all these brands have to have separation, and all these brands need a minimum of 5 acres of storage to keep the cars in. So the forward thinking on this is that the Ford brand only has 2.7 acres, so they need another 3 or 4 acres elsewhere. And with all these maneuvers, and then the reconditioned site is the 1501 Dougal site, where vehicles go to be reconditioned and taken off the main premise. So it's all about a business decision. So this is part of the dealership, and we knew the motivation from the beginning. Now, this is not a great retail site, because it's on Dougal, where Dougal becomes 2-lane, and it's at the extreme eastern end of service land. They are serviced, I believe they're the last property on city services inside the city of Winnipeg. After this, there's the land is the grain elevator, which is on city land, and it's unserviced. And then there's also, what's it called, South Transcona, which is all unserviced. And I hear they don't want to be serviced, but so not a prime site, but again, it's part of assemblage, close connection with the main shop, and part of the greater business model. And what we've done here is looked at this, and I don't think our rents differ a great deal from the assessors. It's my opinion that the rent would be $650, just based on, it's got a good site coverage now for what they do. What that means, it's got a small building with lots of land. And that's the only reason the rent is as high as it is, because it's not a good location for alternate uses. It was a contractor's yard. And they did have to spend some money in the building to get it up to standards for display. So we applied a rent of $650 a square foot. Now, I was looking at the car dealership parameters, and we used vacancy at 2.5, and the car dealership parameter is 2%. Shortfall for car dealers is $6, and we used $375, and I did the math roughly, and there's not a major difference there, no matter what you use. However, there's the cap rate consideration is the same issue as the last one. We're not talking about a nice office flex warehouse that users want to be in. We're talking about a contractor's establishment, basically, on the outskirts of the city of Winnipeg. And we are looking at the same 8.6%. And in previous years, this property was dealt with roughly at almost exactly what we had presented to the board. 4 years ago, I had asked for $719, and the board went to $761, which was assessment department's NOI and an 8.5 capitalization rate. 2 years ago, we had a similar change. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 years ago, we didn't file an appeal because it was, it stayed at $1 million, it went to $1 million even, and we never bothered filing an appeal on that property at $1 million even. And this year, it's gone up to 1.3 million, and you know, this is just, we don't appeal absolutely everything in sight. When we looked at it at the $1 million, we let it go because it was, we felt the opinion value would be lower. It would be somewhat of an argument we'd have to deal with, but you know, it was close to what we had targeted. With the increase this year and no perceivable change in value in the market, we need to have it brought back to where it was before, because if you put this on the market, the interesting thing about contractors' establishment and why was this made available to be vacated was rather interesting. When the Plessy underpass was being built, the sales to contractors were huge. If you got a contract, people had wanted to be situated by the project, so they wouldn't have to bring their equipment there every night. And there were 5 sales in particular that made Dougal look like people must have thought it was, you were on Broadway with the land sale values that were coming up. But as soon as the contracts were awarded, that all died. And And the contractors who didn't get projects moved out, such as the one who was in here before. So it was just an interesting spot in time. The rest of the numbers in here are a series of industrial rents, and I did mention, we have the 8.6 we were looking at again. I do have a new build on Rockwell Road, verbally, 15 Rockwell.
What page are you on?
I don't have it, it's a verbal. It's one of the ones that will be in our reports shortly. It's a new build on Rockwell Road, automotive use, it's a body shop, 8%. And I didn't even have to calculate it, it says so right in the lease. And that's new build in South Winnipeg. So I think that the older property with the poor location at 8.6 is fair. Thank you.
Trish?
The old property, 2001, that's considered old now.
2000, well, it's older than the one I mentioned of the cap rate, because the one I'm talking about, the cap rate is a 2017 building. And in comparison, that was at 8%. And it was built to suit, but the lease specified an 8% rate of return in the cap rate.
And poor location, this is southeast Winnipeg.
Yes.
You consider southeast Winnipeg a poor location?
In terms of this specific area, yes, it's South Transcona, which is unserviced, and the development that's occurred in that area has not been there. There's been development in places like Sage Creek, which I guess would be classified as southeast Winnipeg, and then on some land in the old St. Boniface Industrial Park that, and it didn't end up going industrial. There's been some developments in there, some residential, and it's really not even that far away. But the problem with this land is it's not gonna get developed in that way because it's zoned what it is, and M3, and it's at the end of the service line, and you need transportation upgrades to twin Dugald, bring it up to the perimeter. I don't even know if that's on the capital budget. So no, I don't think so. I mean, plus the underpass was the last major project there, and as far as I know, there's nothing else pending.
Okay, the 2018 Collier's cap rate report, talking about industrial, says how that southeast Winnipeg is the strongest.
No, southwest.
Not according to this.
No. Maybe you should let me have a
Oh,
look at it.
you're right, sorry. You're right. Never mind.
Well, yeah, I've been going there for a bit. I'm thinking, what's happening in the southeast? Nothing.
But as far as industrial, it does say there's increased demand in investment properties.
Well, why southwest is so strong?
That's before even putting the southwest in there. That was the first
Yeah,
one.
but what's happening on demand and why it is in the southwest is there's basically two areas that are gonna have any sort of growth, and one will probably be Centerport if there's going to be, they end up finding some users to put it in. But anything where there's a local decision base, they wanna be in the southwest, and this is how real estate works. It's because the decision maker lives in Tuxedo or Linden Woods or Whitebridge, and that's as far as he wants to drive to work, and that's where they develop. What's happening now that's really strangely hot is McGilvery in the RM of McDonald, where we're seeing incredibly high land sales and permissive development and permissive uses, and no delays from the city, because the city is slow to approve. No, what's the tax, what's the euphemism for the tax on there? Growth fees or, sorry, I forgot the name of the new development tax.
Growth fees.
That's it, growth fees, no growth fees, but no fighting with city inspectors who don't show up and are shopping at Costco, even though it's nearby. industry's moving, that's when we say southwest, it's that McDonald, arm of McDonald land, that's developing. That's where the action is. And the other parts of the southwest, where there was more industrial, are seeing retail development, but within about a year or so, you're gonna see a massive fallout when that one mall gets closed. Can't say which one, but I know which one already is getting shut down. So it's always changing, it's gonna get redeveloped, but not southeast. Because, you know, the general managers don't live in Transcona, and as glib as that might sound, or as flippant as that might sound, that's one of the realities of local markets.
Okay, again, you have no cap rate sales in the most recent cycle.
No, we have the same cap rates, and these are 2 to 4 years old. We're working on ours as an early appeal for us. You know, 2 years ago, I didn't have my first appeal till mid-October. I don't know why this year they're punishing me, making me have hearings in August. I'm supposed to be off for a few months, but on my fault. But we know, we previewed the data, there's no significant changes. There are outliers, and when we look at them, we find out either additional motivation, either to get rid of it or to buy something new, just like every year.
Okay, no further questions.
Linda,
Actually, my question was answered, so thank you.
Tracy,
No, I'm good, thank you, that's all.
your cap rate is reflecting on a body shop more than anything else, isn't it?
Well,
This is the one I caught, I can't,
you know, that body shop one we had at 8% is a nice indicator of an automotive related. We haven't seen an automotive related cap rate for a long time in Winnipeg, because there've been so few investment transactions. And so I was looking at some of the multi-sited industrial transactions. You know, I keep talking about the Slate portfolio, but it's, what's so good about it is that there's so many sales in there that they can't say that there's one little problem with one building or another. It was a lot of properties, and the argument is that there was a price discount for more. No, you paid more for more because you also inherited built-in management and property maintenance staff with it. You inherited everything, you didn't have to start new, so we have, you know, just trying to think, a similar one, actually, I do have a similar one in the arm of Rosser, and that's on page 13B, and it was a leaseback at 7.45%. And that is for a contractor. Rosser is a more permissive municipality than Winnipeg, and this was at a time, I don't know if anybody knows the stories in Rosser and how they froze development for 6 years because they had to figure out what they're gonna do with water. This one was not affected by it. And it was an existing site that was purchased and leased back then to the contractor.
so, the Isuzu uses half the property, because the other part, they store some of the Fords and other vehicles there, do they not?
Yeah, but it's always in flux.
Would that not be considered excessive land, or?
Well, it's gonna be somebody's, it's part of the whole commercial operation.
So this operation is receiving revenue from the other side for the extra?
No, it's all under one automotive group.
But they're split.
Well, you know, what
If you're gonna call it a dealership, it's a dealership.
right, one day a shipment of Chevy trucks shows up and half of them get stored on the site, and a couple of weeks later, there'll be a shipment of Ford trucks show up on the site. But the dealership on that site, we'll sell a Ford and we'll sell a Chevy. Because they're all part of the same automotive group. You know, you can walk into any Vicar Automotive and purchase a vehicle from one of the other groups. It was the manufacturers who didn't want to see brand new Isuzus on the Chevrolet parking lot that forced them to relocate, because it's a high traffic retail site. I mean,
Isuzus are okay to have the Fords there and the Chevys.
they're just happy to be here. I'm surprised they're still here after Suzuki pulled out. But I think they're still owned by General Motors, though, I'm not sure. Or they have a stake, they had a stake in them.
Okay, I'm good. Leave it with us. Figure it out. On to the next, which will be 2125 Google, is that correct? Got that, Rocky?
Yep, this time I did.
Just want to say. Tricia, when you're ready.
All right. All right, 2125 Doolittle Road is roll number 090102625500. The roll year is 2020. And the assessed value is $2,647,000. You go to page 7, you will see the maps of the subject property. And on page 8, you'll see some photographs. There are 5 buildings on the premise. One-story buildings. This is a self-storage center. They were built between 2004 and 2008. It's zoned M3. The land area is 229,400 square feet. Plan area of 51,150 square feet. And a land of plan area of 4.48. If you go, well, okay, we've already gone through the cap rate chart, but once again, cap rates, most cap rates fall between 6.34 and 7.80. And on page 4, we have an income workup. So it's broken down into 3 premises. The first premise, 33,105 square feet, is unheated, and we have a rate of $3.50 on it. The next one is 645 square feet, and that is office area. And the last one, for 11,500 square feet, is unheated storage area, and we have, or sorry, that's heated storage area, and we have a rate of $8.75 on that, for an overall rate of $4.89. And the full leasable area is 45,250 square feet. We have a vacancy loss of 15%, expenses of 2%, shortfall rate of $3.75, giving a net operating income of $158,809. And we have an overall cap rate of 6%, giving us our assessed value of $2,647,000. Now, I do have rent comparables on page 3. However, this is not what I'm relying on, because it's hard to find rent comparables for storage, for self-storage, because they're owner-occupied. The best I could do was look at other storage warehouses with lower ceiling heights and whatnot. So anyways, I have some between 30,400 square feet and 55,500 square feet with rents from $4.65 to $8. What I'd like to draw more attention to is at the back in my addenda on page 12. Sorry, page 11. I printed out a cost report. And the cost report reports with land and cost is $2,862,000, which supports our income approach. And also on page 12, in the income and expense mailer, we have their income, storage income, plus parking income. Their total income is $677,000, or $677,916. They do list their expenses, and they have a net operating income of $185,064. So, which is even higher than our NOI. And thank you, Mr. Chair, that's my presentation.
Rocky, question?
Sure, let's start with that income and expense form. Are you trying to suggest that's rental income? Property income attributable to the property? Do you think there's business income in there?
Well, they rent storage, they earn income renting those units out.
Okay, so now you're saying that, and they've also said 20% vacancy here too, correct?
Yeah, we've applied a 15% vacancy.
And on this statement here, if you were to accept this as rental revenue, are you suggesting that it should be capitalized with city parameters for industrial properties, or how would you capitalize it?
Is it not an industrial property? It is a storage warehouse.
Well, no, it's not. If you're using self-storage income, you have to capitalize it with self-storage cap rates. Do you not?
I don't really understand what,
Well, it's like walking into an apartment, and you're getting apartment income and saying, I'm gonna use retail to cap it. It's a different product, isn't it?
it's industrial use.
What industrial uses go on there?
It's it's an industrial building.
What industrial uses go on there?
It's self-storage.
And who rents these units?
You,
Right, say I rent one, what would I have in there, my old tires?
perhaps.
Is that an industrial usage?
It's an industrial building and they are earning an income. This is the only way that we can do it.
I see, well, apartments have storage lockers in them all the time, do they not? Are they classified as industrial, that storage space?
Are they, they're not industrial buildings, are they?
Well, we'll get to the building in a second, but you're saying it's an industrial building, and that's another issue altogether. I'm just talking about the use right now. These are residents, right, storing their residential goods in rented lockers, correct?
And cars.
And outside storage of cars. Any commercial vehicles being stored there?
I don't know.
Campers, boats?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Were we out, did you inspect the site?
No.
Does the assessment department have any cap rate information on self-storage units? Or any in your studies?
I don't know.
Now, question here is you've done an income workup and a cost approach. Which one are you relying on?
Both of them.
Oh, okay, take longer, but thought you'd pick one. And you mentioned in your income approach that you don't have any rents for think properties like this. There's no market rents. Is that fair to say?
That's fair.
Because all your rents you've listed here are 12 to 26 feet of ceiling height, and the subject is how high?
8 feet.
So ceiling height would be a major factor in achieved rental rates? Is that fair to say?
Well, their low ceiling height has not hurt their business, so,
Well, you got 8 feet here listed.
okay.
Well, you know the pallet rule, right? A pallet's 5 feet high. You put one pallet in this. In a 12-foot building, you put 2 pallets. 17-foot building, you put 3.
Right.
And people pay for how many pallets you can stack in it if you're a warehouse, do they not?
This is an income producing property. They have produced more income than a lot of these other higher ceiling buildings.
Because they have small little units though. And they also suffer high vacancies, correct?
Which we have accounted for with our 15% vacancy.
Now, you're saying that people rent these spaces. You don't charge business tax on these rents, do you? When people rent a locker, do you?
No.
So would that not suggest that there is no commercial component to this site? To the rentals, the occupants, the users?
Not to the users, no.
And in your comparables, you have no unheated space, do you?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. The cost approach, how was this run? Was this just all in Marshall Swift?
Yeah.
And where's the input for the land? I didn't see land sales in here.
Land sales, it just
Yeah.
says the land value.
There's no support for the land value here?
No, I just ran a cost report and it put out the land value.
1,957,000. That was the land value?
That's what it says.
And this is a piece of land that the owner bought for $263,000. Now, albeit it was 15 years prior, you think that the market has shown value going up 8 times in that period? 800% increase in land?
No,
And, are you familiar with the sale of the land next door to this site?
no.
Okay. Now, on your cost approach, the Marshall and Swift, I'm looking at the depreciation. What did you use for a life of it? I'm just looking for the input. Sorry, I'll back that up. Did you use a Marshall and Swift calculator to come up with depreciation? Or was this, excuse me, an override by the assessment department?
I don't know if it's an override or not.
Well, did you run this yourself?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, so what did you tell it when it asked how old the building is?
what did I tell it? I don't
Yeah.
tell it anything. I punch, run cost report and it comes out.
Okay, and so you punched in 2004 for the original age, and then it,
No, it lists each building
Right.
separately.
right, and it's on, okay, I'm just looking at the first one. You told this one, the first one, at the top of page 9, that it was year built was 2004. Now, in order to get depreciation at 26%, you do have to provide it an effective age. What age did you use? What year did you use?
I didn't use any year,
what-
so
okay, if I-
it counts each building
No, but you
as
haven't given an
its year.
effective date, right?
What do you mean, in cost approach?
Yeah, how old is it? At the time you ran this report, to figure out depreciation, you have to know how old it is. So you didn't input anything into it then? So use the current date that you ran this.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. 'Cause I'm familiar with it, I run it too, I just wanted to know if you changed it, because there's no indication here. So in other words, looking at the first entry, you told it was built in 2004, and you ran this report recently, in the last month or so,
Yeah.
so 15-year-old building.
With 14.
So that would that be a fair assumption?
Sure.
Okay. Now, I have information from the Marshall and Swift manual on this style of property. And this is the same manual that you use electronically. You missed the discussion earlier. I was telling everybody, I can't even buy my parking time on the phone, and I use cash. I love the printed manual. What I've got here are the life expectancy guidelines for mini warehouses and the depreciation schedule.
You have one for each of us?
Yeah, certainly. There's 4 there, I'll just hand them to the chair. 'Cause- Now, the first one, we can confirm that Marshall and Swift for mini warehouses ranges between, under the S column, which stands for steel, they have a range of between $30, $35, and $40, 40 years of life. You see that? And you call this quality 1, which means that this is low cost, cheap, which means that it has a life of 30 years. I know that for a fact, that this quality 1 is the cheap. But you didn't see any of this in the system, though, did you?
See what?
That it said that there's a 30-year life attributable to it,
No, I saw that it was quality 1.
which is cheap, okay. Now, on the next page, which is depreciation of commercial properties, when you look at the 30-year and then you run it down to 15, you get a depreciation percentage of 35%. You see where it
I don't
cross-referenced
know
it?
where you're looking.
I'll just show you on mine. And that's a 15-year life, where you intersect on the back page, 15 years with a 30-year life. Now, I've gone through all of these numbers here, and they don't coincide with the manuals. That's why I was asking about, Matt, if you had put in an input. In this particular case, the depreciation should have been 35%, and here you've applied it at 26%. On the Marshall and Swift system. But I mean, your answer to me is fair. You said you punched in what you punched in, and that's the way I have to look at it. So
I don't
I'm saying a misapplication.
alter
of
any
this.
numbers.
No,
I
I
just run a
trust
cost
you.
report. I don't work in a cost section.
Right.
I asked, how can I support this? They said, see if the cost report supports that value. That's what I did.
Now, you're aware that that's the Marshall and Swift method of depreciation. Do you know what the Appraisal Institute would teach age life, which is a pure, unchanged amount, which means that a 15-year-old building, your 30-year life, you're to depreciate 50%. Were you aware that that's what other people teach?
In appraisal?
Yes.
Well, I work in assessment.
No, well, you're covered under your department carries the standard of the IAACO, whatever, International Association of Assessing Officers, and they follow the same guidelines the Appraisal Institute follows. Now, you're aware that the age life is, well, let's put it this way, you're aware the age life is another method for depreciation.
Yes.
Okay. Now, these buildings are kit buildings, correct?
Yeah.
And slab floor, 1 panel steel, light bulbs to sites that have no heat, and the ones that have heat will have a fiberglass insulation batt and a space heater. fair description?
Yep.
Now, you have brought us no sales, so I do have some information on some sales in the area. Just on the math on this, I just want to make sure I'm making a lot of mistakes today here.
This is a question, right, Stan?
Yeah. How much is that per acre? 1,957,000? I believe that's 5.3 acres. I have $369,245 per acre. Is that about right?
That's the question.
Sorry, what was the question?
Is that about right? 369,000 per acre?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have some rebuttal information. I didn't see any sales in here, so, and I know we don't have a standard for rebuttal, other than show up at the hearing with it. We ran these sales on the Sabre system and without editing, and we just looked at general Vindu sales, which is vacant industrial. And there are a number in the area close by, Camille Sis, Debates, and a very large one on Google, which is so far out of the range, but I saw the address there, and I know who bought that, and I probably wouldn't want to rely on that. But Debates, Camille Sis, these are service lands in St. B Industrial Park that sold for a range of 150,000 to 214,000 per acre. That's just some rebuttal information, that's not a question. I guess I could have saved it for later.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah, well.
Are you done with your questions then?
Sure, yes.
Okay. Linda, any questions?
I have no question.
No, question from the
None for you as well? Thank you, Tracy. I'll see what you come up with. Move ahead.
Okay, continuing a bit more rebuttal. On page 3 of my report, there's an overhead shot of the site. And it's marked with a blue boundary, which shows the existing boundaries. Now, when the Plessy underpass was being constructed, the city of Winnipeg obtained a temporary easement in order to move the rail line, and they encroached into the subject area by about 10 feet. As part of that process, the city also ended up declaring that other piece of property, which is above it, but actually to the west, a rectangular piece of property, after construction was complete, that property was declared surplus, and it was sold to the subject property owner for $1. And here is the transaction. I was trying to dig this up this morning, and there was a construction easement that was taken on it, in which the city agreed to pay, I think it was $3,600, and then they had wanted an extension for another $2,000. And with that, they declared the other part surplus. So the city itself thinks the land in the area is worth $1. Now, the reasons why they thought it was only worth $1 is that you see the access that it had in the picture, that was for construction, and that was going to be terminated. So the site couldn't be marketed. So of course it should sell for less, but for $1. It's also the reason we never appealed last year, because we were waiting for the supplemental to come out, and I only found out after the appeal period had ended, that there were delays in it. This property will be amalgamated into the subject property, and as of this morning, it hasn't been done. So we expect a supplemental will be coming out on the site. There's also it's a longer copy, but it's the financial summary of the project that was, the last one was released in 2016, which indicates that the deal was made to get rid of the property for that amount to Eastside Storage, and they were also going to be awarded a temporary easement.
Excuse me, can I just stop you? What, are we allowed to only park on the street till 3?
No, I think so.
Out here, are you right out front there?
Yeah, right up front.
I can go check.
I think it
I'll
is.
double check.
Can you check? I might have to move my,
I think it's 3:30.
No, I think you can park.
You can park there all the
Yeah.
time, it's on that one lane.
yeah, I'm on the other side of the street there.
Yeah.
Carry on, I'm sorry. Last thing, I need another ticket.
There's room in the other boardroom, you should just bring
I
it.
could just bring it in here.
I think you should.
Sorry, I was just looking for the City of Winnipeg, it's in this standing policy committee and finance, December 1st, 2016, financial status report, and there's a project number on it, and it can confirm the numbers I've been giving you with the dollar. So this is a flawed cost report, and another issue on rebuttal is, I'm not challenging the assessor's initial costs, because I think that most times we are budgeting around $20 a foot for construction of these projects. Obviously, depreciation is much higher. But as I was reviewing this, the workup on this, it occurred to me that if somebody were building one of these and buying the land at the fair price for it, the cap rate would be, and the cap information she brought forward on their income, the cap rate would be something ridiculous like 25%, because that's the nature of self-storage business. That's why we don't rely on the income from the self-storage business. They're a lot cheaper to build, the land was much, much less than original, and the incomes are higher, but it's a business prospect, and with wild fluctuations in vacancy. So now I'll move on to my report. For years, we've had this ongoing debate on how these things should be valued, and about 10 years ago, we began just,
We're gonna take a break for a second.
sorry,
Oh, we're just gonna order it.
we began looking at them on the income basis, and I think every year, the boards have applied an income basis, and we've been generally using a formula of $5 a foot on heated, $3 on the unheated. No, there's no market to back that up, and an 8% cap rate. And that's what we're looking for. We didn't appeal last year, as I mentioned, because we were waiting for the supplemental, which never came out. And I'm sure, since we appealed this year, I'm sure the supplemental will be coming very shortly as soon as titles process. It just seems to be the way things work. The interesting thing on self-storage rates is that I had asked the assessor early about what type of property we were. In Colliers, we have an actual working group on self-storage. They're based in Ottawa. Oliver, my colleague, is leading it, and we have classifications, and generally the cap rates are good across the country because it's the same users. It's not a location-dependent thing. And we see the caps going from mid-7s to 10s on actual income. And then here's our guide as to how you classify one of these, and you can see that our subject doesn't really rank really high on location. It's somewhere between tertiary market and rural location. And with access and exposure, it's poor access, and the reason why it has poor access is that there's a median that extends and limits the ability to turn onto Dugald from the subject property. That was part of the construction project. On page 5 is the most recent picture we have, dated 2015, and you can see that the access there, you notice to the south, to the southwest of it is the entrance to the Transcona Country Club, and they got a nice real turn in, turn out. This site doesn't have a turnout for eastbound. It requires a U-turn at the next intersection, and getting in, if you look at how do you get in when you're eastbound, there is no turn in. People just make the illegal turn, but you can see that the lane runs the wrong direction. So legally, it doesn't have adequate access. Poor, again, it's fair and fair. Quality, of course, it's fair quality because it's steel and wood frame. And condition is good though, because it's not that old. So it's, it's an A or B in condition, no issue there. Occupancy, you can see that a good one is not over 90%, and a fair one is at 70%, and we're reporting 20%, so we're in between good and average. Saturation, right now, our market moved from, and I have a 300-page report on this that Oliver put together, and he talks about market saturation. Our market in the last 10 years has moved from an underserved market to an overserved market. And with all the self-storage that have gone up, because it's a lucrative business. So we're now in the fair category, we're a saturated market. And then amenities, they are at a B on amenities, because they have an on-site manager, not an overnight, not one who lives there, video surveillance, and electronic gates. But there are some sites where they have an on-site manager. There's only 2 or 3 in the city that I'm aware of. So all in all, our rating of it puts it at best in the second worst category, which would be average. And in our rating guide, that's going to translate to about anywhere between 8 and 9%, depending on the revenue that it's generating for the existing NOI. So at 9% on the existing NOI of $180,000, that puts a value somewhere around the $2 million mark. Now, if you take the hypothetical on it, the way we had done, and now the next problem becomes.
Could you repeat that number again? Around 2 million?
Around 2 million, which would be 180,000 at 9%, as a self-storage, but we have business income in there, which is, I think you have to run it like the hotels, where you have to start subtracting the FF&E and all of it, and the management fees and things like that. Market, for appraisal purposes, though, they do use the actual income. Now, the next problem became, when I started doing self-storage in Winnipeg, I had several clients, and they all had different types of properties. All of them charge the same amount of money for rent. And when they do the cost approach on them, the older sites, we had one in Morey Industrial, was assessed at a third of what the new sites were on Dugald and the other new site I had by the Mint. A whole third of their value. So that's because the cost approach does that. All that depreciation brings it down to nothing. So we tried to work with the assessment department and said, let's at least try to be fair to all these people. They're all getting the same income. Let's put the same rents on them. And generally the boards agreed. The assessors, off the record, agreed. Management has been fairly quiet about it. We haven't been challenging each other at Board of Revision, at Municipal Board on it. Most of us are content to let it lie, and we found an adequate way of addressing these. And that's what we're asking for today.
Questions?
I have no questions.
What's the parking time out there?
5:30 here.
5:30? Good. I'm going to have to plug the meter in, but. Tracy, any questions?
No.
Linda, any questions? That was it. the one, well, I guess we've had this discussion before.
Yeah.
When we talk about these units, we always look at it for what is best used for the properties at that time, because these are looked at as a 35 to 40-year project, correct?
Correct.
Because some of these lands will develop in the next 30 to 40 years, and you don't want something permanent that'll damage your value then.
Well, right, and a good example of that is the one on Monroe, which was the old, an old fiberboard plant, and they put on a self-storage site as an interim use, because their only real capital investment, I mean, the biggest cost they had was sprinklers. You know, the pad was the next highest cost, and after that, the kits for it. So, it's a good interim use that you're not gonna worry about if you bulldoze in and put up something good. And on Monroe, there might be potential for multifamily. Some of the other sites as well. With this site, I don't see, I mean, it's gonna be a compound. So, it's probably performing at its highest and best use, this site.
At this time.
Right, and then think of the one on Waverly as another example, or the one on Keniston. And yeah, they're gonna be short-term uses, because, you know, pretty soon someone's gonna offer more for the land than this, and there'll be a retail development up there. But I can't imagine a Costco going in this.
I got no questions. You got it. Move that one. I guess we're on to the last one, right?
No, right?
Hmm?
Can we take a bathroom break?
Yes, we can take it. Okay.
or something, so.
Okay, let's go on to the last one. It's 472 Dufferin. Now you got the papers?
Pre-asked questions.
We're up and gone. Trish?
All right. Roll number 14001973000. The roll year is 2020, and we have an assessed value of $1,092,000. On page 7 of my brief, you'll find a map. And pages 8 and 9, you'll see some photographs. It's made up of 3 buildings. There's mostly 1 story, and there's a small 2-story office area. Built between 1961 and 1999 is when they had an addition put on. We have an effective year of 1985. Wall heights are 12 feet and 20 feet. It's zoned M1. The land area is 22,056 square feet. Plan area of 13,869 square feet. With a land to plan area of 1.59. Page 4, you'll find my income workout. We have a total leasable area of 14,797 square feet, and we have a rent of $6.01 on that. Vacancy loss of 6%, expenses of 2%, a shortfall rate of $3.75, giving a net operating income of $78,593. We have a cap rate of 7.20%, which is within the 20th and 80th percentile in our cap rate chart, which brings us to our value of $1,092,000. Page 3, rent comparables. All the comparables are storage warehouse, like the subject, in the same market region, and rents range from $5.35 to $7.50. And at the time that I did my brief, I had not inspected. I have since inspected it. I didn't realize how much refrigeration and freezer space there is in there, so I didn't, that's not accounted for in my comparables. There's one with some refrigerator space, but that's all I can say for that. And thank you, Mr. Chair, that's my presentation.
Questions, Rocky?
Sure. So the use of the site is fish processing and selling, retailing, right?
We don't have retail.
They closed retail?
3 months ago.
Years ago.
Was it years ago? Oh, okay.
So they're just wholesaling that? When you list the wall height here at 12 to 20 feet, is that an exterior measurement? I was just looking at your picture, and it looks to me like, the front door is that's 12 foot on the exterior. That's not clear height, is it?
I'm not sure.
Well, I think in the past I've heard assessors say that they use exterior height for walls.
Yeah.
Okay. And are your comparables done the same way, exterior height?
Yeah.
So you know that the market generally applies on comparables, clear span, clear height, right? Right, like when we quote a height, we're quoting what our knowledge of the interior height is rather than the exterior.
Is that a question?
No, yes, were you aware of that?
No.
Okay, but you're using it the same way all the time, though? It's always an exterior then, okay. All right, I just wanted to make sure we're clear on that. Now, your comparables for rent, you've only got, I believe, one of them is at the same height as the subject, that's the first one?
The 12 feet,
Yeah.
so you're saying there's no 20 feet wall space?
Well, predominantly, oh, I'm sorry, you were in the site, you're aware that it's predominantly a 12-foot building, but the addition of the 20-foot freezer space, correct?
Yep.
And then there's a small second level mezzanine.
Yes.
Okay. But your comparables, you've got one at 12 feet,
Yep.
okay, and as far as location goes, as the question was asked you before, only the first three are in the general neighborhood?
Yep.
What's in 771 Main?
I can tell you what they do, I can't, it's recycling electronics.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess there's no point in talking about this capitalization thing all to death, but we've done that already, but the, well, have you been in your comparable at 931 Wall?
Yes, I have.
So you're, what's inside that, you know?
Yes, I do.
And you can't probably say it with the
I can't say
camera.
the name.
You can't say it with the camera running, I'll bet.
No, that's correct, we're not supposed to.
No, it's,
Company names.
yes, no, it's for a different reason, okay, that's fine. And I'm just looking at the pictures of your comparables, for example, Alexander, you've got a, looks like a 40-foot truck backed up to it, the backloaded zone. And the subject, of course, has a truck-loaded bay as well in the larger section. Sorry, you'd said something about not realizing there was so much freezer space. How would that affect the assessment?
Usually that commands higher rents.
Do you have freezer rents in any of these comparables?
No, that's why I should have gone higher.
Those are my questions, thanks.
Any questions on that?
I do not.
Tracy?
No questions?
No questions? On with your workup.
Site, I have an original date of 1920, not 1961. And back in the years when you could still access them, we did get a copy of the field sheet. If you look at the building on my page 3, and you see it has the cut corner, angled corner, that's the original 1920 section. You remember the old days from the retail sites, they always cut the corners at an angled entranceway. Any old retail facility in like the West End, North End. So looking at the roof of it, you can see that section was the northeast corner, and then there were actually two additions to it. We had 1980 and 2009, and that was, there's a engineer who did measurement, and there's a sketch on the wall inside there. I think the city's information is probably incorrect, and we would take the engineer's stamp ahead of theirs. We did have this debate 8 years ago, and the city ended up changing their square footage as a result of it to the engineer's measurements and the building layout. We did speak to the contractor about the way they,
And that's in here?
no, it isn't.
Here, here, look.
Here's an old sketch, and you can see well, I don't know if you want to see the old sketch, but this is where it came from, an engineer's sketch. And the different sections on here are shown with the old section being this one, and then they added on this one, and then this one at different dates. We had applied a rent of $5.25 a square foot, and I feel that it's more comparable to the assessor's number one, who I just looked up, which is a renovated 12-foot user, and as well as we had a few others. But the rental market activity in this neighborhood is a very sparse. It's more of an owner-occupant area. And what rentals do come up tend to be very inferior space. So supported by the assessor's rate from the lower end and the ones in the neighborhood, I think our 5.25 pulls right in there. It is not on Wall Street. The other disagreement is on a capitalization rate, and this is a fish processing facility. Now, the assessor said, well, if I'd known it had coolers and freezers, I would have been more, but you know what, you get freezers, you also get costs. They've got a lifespan in those compressors of 5 to 10 years. And so you're running into significant capitalization rates. And a point of interest would be, I don't know if any of you remember when Canada Packers mothballed One Warman Road, where they had spent, I think $200 on building it, and it sold for, I think it was like $50 a foot to really a bottom feeder style of development. And when I mean bottom feeder, I don't mean that in a negative sense. There were just no takers in the market for big freezer spaces, as there are very few in this existing market for freezer spaces. You have to be a user who can actually take advantage of that. It's a specialized usage. We had used a rate of 9% and found this to be inferior to most properties. Location deficient, obviously, it's not in the investment market. Previous orders were at 8.75%, and previous year 8.75 the prior year to that. Applicant's evidence, so that was 9% from the previous year. Applicant's evidence, and we're 9.5. It's always been a cap much higher. Last year, there was a recommendation, and it was just a numeric value to $714,000, which we accepted. And this year, we feel there's been no change. That was an assessor's recommendation, and of course, we did not appeal it. Verbal recommendation to $714,000. It fits in. There's pretty hard to argue market growth on Dufferin, and that's my presentation.
Question, Trish?
Wow, I didn't know we were allowed to be now bringing in previous assessments, because I could have said for the last property, this is what it was last year, and this is what
But I
the cap
did.
rate was, right?
I said it though,
I know.
and I said I didn't appeal it because I was waiting for the sub.
Yeah, but you're mentioning all the previous values and cap rates, so
Well,
we're not
I
dealing with
think
previous.
the issue was, in the previous one, is we've had 10 or 12 years of history on the property where it's come out with, on mass appraisal systems with 7% cap rates, which have been adjusted upwards, realizing that where its location was. And I think what I'm trying to say here, it's not a market issue, it's a question of how it fits into a mass appraisal model. It doesn't fit. All these properties today have a difficult time. This is probably the worst. Now, 2 years ago, the requested cap rate was 7%, and a rent of $483 a square foot. And it was dropped like I said, we were given an offer which we found reasonable in terms of overall value. This year it's at 7.2%, and this is not an investment property. You won't find somebody willing to knock the doors down. Now, we do have a very interesting capitalization rate that is nearby, that's the closest comparable I know of, and that's on our page 13. And that's 51 Akins, which is located a few blocks away in the same general area. This is a manufacturer of heating and ventilation equipment, and it capped at 11%. And we managed it, brokered it, and my wife's family were the owners. So this is, we knew what the cap rate was at 11%.
So last year, when you accepted a rec, you accepted a rec at 7%.
No, that's what the original assessment was.
Yeah, and that's what it remained with.
I don't think so.
$4.11 at 7% cap.
We looked at the number, we last year had a value of, we had 425 at 9% was what we brought in, but the offer was not made to us with numeric values. Because I didn't have that. It was a number offered to us, and we were fine with it. I mean, if you want to drop it to $4.11 and keep your silly cap, that's fine too.
Okay, so in your workup, you have a 5% management fee. Is this owner occupied?
That's correct, and he pays people to, if it were rented, he'd have to pay people to recover.
It's not rented, it's owner occupied, he doesn't have management. What's the 5% for?
So now the assessment department is going to say, maybe if you have non-recoverables, because you rent, you get to claim them, but you don't if you own it. Well, that's not logical, because if you hypothetically rented it, you're still going to have non-recoverables. You're going to have to pay things like accountants and legal fees and...
For the building or for the business?
For the real estate investment. The nature of a capitalization rate is it's an investment, a return on investment. And any costs that go to creating the income that goes to that return on investment are expenses that a buyer looks at. A buyer doesn't say, oh, I'm gonna get free legal, I'm gonna get free leasing commissions, I'm gonna get free management or asset management. All those things cost money, and they all have to be taken into account. It doesn't matter if you rent it or you own it. Where does this guy recoup my fee?
Question, Trish? You don't have to answer his question. Do you have a question?
No.
Do you have any questions, Trace?
I do not.
Linda?
I do not.
Looks like you're done, Mike. Have a good evening. We got 18 minutes for that plug in. Shut her down.